wind had teeth that night, sharp and wet with the promise of early snow. He was riding the fence line, boots stiff in the stirrups, when the mare caught a scent and stopped dead. The lantern swung at his side, throwing rings of yellow against the dark brush. Something was there, too still to be wind, too heavy to be a fox. He dismounted slow, boots crunching frost. That's when he heard it, a breath that was more of a tremor than sound. Closer now, a shape lay in the scrub, coat torn, hair clotted with dust and cold. She flinched when the lantern glow brushed her face. "I can't run anymore," she murmured, voice thin as paper. "Please." The rancher looked at the rifle in his hand, then set it down in the grass. "No one's asking you to," he said, and knelt. He saw the marks of the trail on her boots. Too many miles, too few stops. Whoever had run her down had left her just enough strength to crawl this far. He didn't ask who. Not yet. "Water," she whispered, lips barely moving. He uncorked the canteen and held it to her. She sipped once, twice, like a bird scared to land. Then she coughed and pulled the fur-lined shawl tighter, though it did little against the night. His cabin was a mile down slope. Warm enough if the stove held. Too far to carry. Not far enough to leave her here. "Can you walk?" he asked. She shook her head once. The way a child does when it no longer matters. He hauled her up by the elbow, slow and steady. She weighed less than the sack of oats tied to his saddle. When she swayed, he steadied her, and they walked. The moon was a smear behind the clouds. Her boots dragged in the mud, leaving long, wavering lines. Twice she stumbled. Each time he paused, adjusted his grip, and said nothing. The cabin door creaked like an old tree when he pushed it open. Inside, the fire was near dead, a pile of coals breathing in the dark. He set her in the chair nearest the hearth, fed the flames with cedar, and hung his coat over hers. She didn't ask where she was, only watched him as though one wrong word would send her back to the cold. He sliced bread, laid it on the plate, poured coffee into a tin cup. When he set it down, her fingers shook as they reached. Steam touched her face, and her eyes watered. "Don't need to talk tonight," he said. "Fire first. Talk when the light's better." For a long while, only the fire spoke, snapping, crackling, spitting tiny sparks. Outside, a branch shifted under weight, or maybe just the wind. He knew better than to ask who she was running from. The night still had ears. But he also knew this. Something had driven her this far, and things that drive that hard don't stop at the tree line. And before dawn came, he'd see the first sign of it. Dawn came thin and colourless. Snow clung to the eaves, and the creek ran slow beneath a skin of ice. She was still in the chair, shawl wrapped around her like a shell. Her eyes followed his boots as he crossed to the door. "Where am I?" she asked at last. "South Ridge, my spread." He pulled on his gloves. "Close enough to town if you need a doctor. Far enough they won't bother till the trail's warm." "They?" she asked, voice hitching on the word. He didn't answer. Tracks had formed in the soft mud near the pasture. 2 riders, maybe 3, coming down the north side and doubling back before sunrise. He traced their pattern with his eyes, then covered them with straw. Back inside, she held the tin cup like it was a promise. Her colour had come back some, but the tremor in her hands hadn't left. "You've got watchers," he said simply. She stiffened. "I told you. I can't." "Don't matter what you told me," he cut in. "What matters is who's listening." For the next 2 days they lived quiet. He rode the line in shorter loops. She stayed by, the hearth mending her shawl with a bent needle he'd found in the drawer. At night he played the harmonica low, just enough to push the dark to the edges of the room. The 3rd morning, a nail gleamed in the post by his gate, a square of cloth pinned beneath it, no words, just a colour he didn't like. He tore it down and burned it in the stove. She watched the smoke rise. "They're telling you to hand me over. They're telling me they know I won't." That night the air tasted like iron. Coyotes yipped high on the ridge, too many at once, She sat near the window, eyes scanning the dark, one hand on the shawl, the other on the table's edge. He poured her another coffee. "You'll have to trust me soon." Her laugh was bitter. "I don't even trust the ground." "You don't have to. Just the door." The next day, the wind shifted, carrying the smell of horses that didn't belong. By sundown, the first shadow moved against the hill. The storm broke just as the sky bruised to purple. He was at the woodpile, hands numb, when the mare snorted and turned to the dark. One rider, then another. They didn't come close, just lined the ridge like fence posts. Inside, she stood by the table, shotgun leaning against her knee. Her breath came slow and deep. "They won't knock," he said. "They never do." He set the last log by the stove, bolted the door, and doused the lamp. Only the fire glowed now, painting her face in shifting gold. A knock came anyway, one hard, hollow. The rancher didn't answer. Another knock, then a voice, low and drawn out. "Hand her." Just that. 2 words. She gripped the shotgun tighter. "I can—" "No," he said, steady. "You stay behind the door." They waited. Silence stretched until it felt like rope around the room. Then came the scrape of boots on the porch, a hand on the latch. He moved first. The door swung wide with the wind. A shape lunged, shadow wrapped in cold, and the rancher's shoulder met it square. The fight was brief. 2 strikes, 1 shove, the sound of wood splintering. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She raised tall. He shotgun, barrel steady, and fired once into the night, not at the shape, but above its head. The blast cracked the dark wide open. The ridge went quiet. Boots retreated. Hooves tore at the frozen ground. When the smoke cleared, only the wind came through the doorway. He shut the bolt, slow and final. "You did right." She set the shotgun down, hands still trembling, but her eyes were steady now. Outside, the ridge was empty. Inside, the room smelled of powder and pine. But both of them knew their leaving wasn't the same as giving up. The next morning was bright, cold, and almost clean. Snow covered the tracks, the ridge bare as if no one had ever stood there. She sat at the table, shawl folded neat, a cup warming her fingers. "They'll be back," she said. "Maybe." He sipped his own coffee. Or maybe they've seen enough to pick another trail. He opened the shutters. Sunlight slid across the floorboards, catching on the fresh flowers he'd set by the sill. Late bloom, but something to look at. Her eyes followed them, and for the first time since that night, she almost smiled. "You didn't ask me what I did," she said softly. "Would it change what I'd do next?" She shook her head. "No." They spent the day mending fence, patching holes, fixing what was left open. At dusk, he moved the bed closer to the hearth. She didn't ask why, just laid her shawl across it and watched the fire breathe. Outside, the world was still whispering. Somewhere down the trail, a rider would carry a story half true, half lie. The sheriff would nod slow. The town would murmur. Life would fold it into the dust like it always did. Inside, the cabin held its own peace. That night, as the harmonica hummed low and the lantern swung with the draft, she said, "I thought I'd have to keep running." "You still can," he said. "Door's not locked." She looked at the door, then at him. "No, not tonight." The fire cracked once, sending sparks up the flue. Outside, the snow thickened. Sometimes the quiet after is louder than the storm before. And sometimes it asks you this: